How much does China's opening up matter to you? Well, a lot. Because in trade alone, last year China accounted for 14% of global exports and 10% of global imports, and there is more to come. A resolution adopted during a major meeting of the Communist Party of China has put opening up as a quote-unquote defining feature of Chinese modernization. The resolution of the third plenum of the 20th CPC Central Committee on further deepening reform comprehensively to advance Chinese modernization was adopted. Will China make it easier for foreign businesses to operate here? With China's foreign trade reaching new heights in the first half of this year, what does it mean to the world? Welcome to this special edition of The Point on the third plenum. I'm pleased to be joined from Hong Kong by Cheng, founding director of the Center on Contemporary China and the World, or CCCW, at the University of Hong Kong. He was the former director of Brookings Institution's John L. Thornton China Center. From Colombo, Sri Lanka, by Yasiru Ranaraja, director of Brazil Belt and Road Initiative Sri Lanka. From Pretoria, South Africa, by Gerd Johannes Grobler, former senior diplomat and ambassador of South Africa. From Wiesbaden, Germany, by Michael Borchmann, former Director General of the International Affairs Department of the state of Hesse. And last but not least, from Stockholm, Sweden, by Hussein Askari, Vice President of the Belt and Road Institute in Sweden, also Distinguished Research Fellow at Guangdong Institute of International Strategies. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. First, let's take a look at the communique, the summary of the resolution that was issued after the meeting. It says reform is the most frequently mentioned word. It says that China will steadily expand institutional opening up. And I will go to Mr. Li for your take. What is the biggest takeaway for you at this very crucial meeting?
Well, it's reaffirmed China's commitment and the confidence and determination to remain as reform-minded and the openness to the international community. And most importantly, it's a layout, the blueprint for Chinese-style modernization. It's not a Western-style modernization. China will pay more attention to green development, to the common prosperity, and to reduce the economic disparity. And most importantly, China will put more emphasis on innovation, especially technological innovation. So a lot of discussion about the education, about the research, about self-reliance in the technological catch up at the time that the Western countries wanted to decouple with China. So this is very, very important. You will see that the Chinese government will allocate more resources, human resources, and the talent to make that happen. This is a very strong message.
Mr. Ranaraja, from Sri Lanka's point of view and from other developing point of view, or of those partners of China along the Belt and Road Initiative, what caught your attention?
Well, one of the areas that I caught my attention was how China focused on reform and in education, which is very important for the global South, which has been lacking for ages. And that has been the issue for many countries, to bring bottom-down regulations in most of our countries. So a few months ago, I went to Jiangxi, Yichun city of China, and I saw how bottom-up level of regulations are formulated, and how top-down and bottom-up regulation methods are equally used in Chinese policymaking. So I believe education is one of the main important pivotal assets that Chinese modernization and opening up will give to the regional countries. That's the main thing that got into my mind.
Mr. Grobler, from the South African point of view and also from a diplomat's background, what have you noticed that is significant about this very important meeting? Education, of course, was given strategic importance, one of the first factors mentioned. But for you, what was the big takeaway?
We regard the outcome as very positive, very constructive. The plenum was indeed a proof, a further proof that reform has always proved to be necessary for China to make progress in its economic and social development since it was initiated in the 70s. But let me, for the sake of time, say one of the most important issues that I lifted out as a diplomat out of the communique is the issue of pursuing a major country diplomacy, with describing opening up as a defining feature of Chinese modernization.
Right.
That really struck us, because this leads to so many other positive, constructive issues in terms of trade, investment, that the world and South Africa and Africa are looking forward. So that to me, and of course the very strong focus of foreign policy on peace and development. And China is really a leader in the world in this regard.
We'll expand definitely on the opening up aspect you just mentioned, Mr. Ambassador. Let me go to Mr. Borchmann from a German perspective and also from the business perspective, which is very important and hotly contested area, I would say. What did you pay attention in this communique? What did you look for? Did you find it?
I think many points are already mentioned, but this point, which is a basic point, continuing the reform and opening policy, this I regard very important. You know, our economy is quite keen of China. Our economy in Germany would be much weaker without that win-win cooperation with China. So, but sometimes you hear they even want more opening up and even a stronger market access. And I guess this is written down in the communique. And besides, as a generalist, we can say since the starting of the reform and opening policy, China developed from an extended working bench to a high-tech country, a leading country perhaps in electro vehicles. Yes, and so this was a path of success, of great success. You don't find such kind of paths at any place in the world. And so it is decisive that they say we continue on this path, which is described in China as socialism with Chinese characteristics.
Mr. Askari, observing from your point of view, you have written extensively about extending Belt and Road opportunities to other parts of the world. What opportunities do you see here in the new phase of deepening reform?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I think what this communique of the third plenum represents is like a classroom example of how China's reform and opening up policy has been an evolutionary process. China is not developing in a linear way. China is developing in a non-linear way. So the China of today is not the China of 10 years ago or 15 or 20 years ago. So China is achieving, jumps in its development. And this is, of course, as the communique says, this represents a great opportunity. For example, that China is now becoming one of the largest or the super large market that it is. It represents big opportunities for many other nations. The issue is, for example, in the communique mentions the fact that, China will pursue the high quality Belt and Road Initiative and cooperation through that. And this means that China's relationship to other countries in the Belt and Road in the global South
will shift to a higher quality of development. For example, industrialization, that China today will be exporting technology, know-how, and capital for other nations. I have good examples from Africa, for example, from its neighborhood, where China is using its own leveraged scientific, technological, and high-quality development to other nations. So in a way that in this new multipolar world, China is becoming like what is called primus inter pares, the first among equals, where China is leading a process of globalization and multilateral development where all nations can rise together.
Well, let's talk about the opportunities in terms of trading. For instance, during the press conference on Friday, after the meeting concluded, a senior Chinese official said that China wishes to translate its vast market into a significant opportunities to the world. However, if you look at some of the trade numbers, and I want to go to Mr. Lee for this question, in Western countries, especially if you look at some of the trading numbers, you'll see that China is even increasing further its trade surplus with some of its major trading partners. In June, for instance, China's export value grew by 9% year on year, and the monthly surplus reached 99 billion US dollars, the highest since records began in 1980. Mr. Lee, how will China go about balancing its trade relations with other countries, and what will reforms look like in this area?
Well, certainly Chinese government is fully aware of this new development. So you see that the community emphasizes inclusive growth or balance the trade, fair trade. I think at the moment that certainly that the Western, especially U.S.-led decoupling with China or de-risking with China, that partly explained the challenges or the problems. But also, as you know, that China in the past few years has also organized the import, conferences in Shanghai. This is a Chinese effort to try to balance the economy, balance the trade, and the China certainly will continue to open up for ASEAN countries, for Europe. Now, it's in terms of U.S., of course, there's some political restraints and the deglobalization effort on the part of the U.S. in the name of decoupling, de-risking, relocation, and etc. This is actually will only hurt the U.S., will only hurt the U.S. economy, and the inflation will continue to grow. I think that China wants to make a point that China is still willing to cooperate with the United States, no matter which leader will be the White House after election. So I think that Chinese leadership, this communique, continue to emphasize openness and continue to emphasize the positive role of globalization and also regional integration, particularly regarding China's neighboring country.
Let's talk about China's trade relationship with neighboring countries or countries in the region. For Sri Lanka, for instance, Mr. Ranaraja, some Western mainstream media are cautioning against a so-called alarm in some countries about China is increasing exports and trade relations in general with these countries. Do you share this kind of concern that as China gets deeper, grows, sells more, but also at the same time buying more, maybe not as much? Do you share this kind of concern that this may be alarmist, that this may have negative consequences on the economies of its trading partners?
I don't think there is some sort of view within the locals about Chinese doing trade with China, because Sri Lanka have been doing trade with China for centuries, and China was one of the main trading partners, not for 10, 20 years, but over centuries. Chinese traders have been coming to Sri Lankan ports. Looking forward from here, we need to find the new technologies that are coming with trade, the integration of AI and other automation technologies that China has, all these technologies they can share around the world, which is Sri Lanka is a good model. I'll give you two examples. One is we have invested 10 years ago the Colombo port, the terminal CICT terminal, which is now very performing terminal in the region. So not only for China, the development and the reforms of China has come to to the regional countries as in all. Apart from that, we need to train the people in the region for the new jobs, which will be there in the next 20, 30 years or in the next few decades. So to do that, as I mentioned before, education is very important. To give you another example, a few days ago, we have signed with China an educational cooperation program to develop a digital transformation general education project in Sri Lanka. The first phase of it will have around 900 classrooms in 500 schools around Sri Lanka. So these form of ground level developments we have been seeing in Sri Lanka, which the results will come in the future for this. So I believe these new jobs are the areas that Sri Lanka and the regional countries are focusing on.
Let's look at more specifically opportunities for Belt and Road countries. For South Africa, for instance, Mr. Grobler, China's trade with countries participating in the BRI rose 7% in the first 6 months of this year. And a senior official said the day after the meeting concluded that China will enhance unilateral opening up to the least developed countries. What new opportunities do you see in this between China and four countries, either South Africa or other underdeveloped countries in Africa?
In fact, I said that Africa was very happy with the outcome of the plenary because the opening up certainly provides many, many opportunities. And so African leaders have hailed China's modernization, the process, as an inspiration for African countries, and many are actually copying the process, the model that China is following. But if one looks at the trade relations between Africa and many developing countries, there is a huge expectation to further deepen trade and investment. And one of the positive things that China has been doing is to open up to facilitate African exports, not only from Africa, but from many developing countries in agriculture, for instance. In agricultural sector, China is opening up to these countries. So that's why the whole reform, the whole opening up concept is so important to Africa and to the developing world.
Let's take a closer look at foreign investment into China. We're not just talking about trade, we're moving on to foreign investment. And the latest number are that China saw nearly 27,000 new foreign invested enterprises established in the first half of this year, and that's a 14% increase year on year. So that looks very, very good. But at the same time, the actual use of foreign direct investment dropped by nearly 30%. That is against the background of an 18% decline globally last year. So overall, foreign direct investment is not doing well, but China also did not well in that part. Mr. Borchmann, let me go to you for this question. Can we expect measures to address this decline? How do you look at this decline of 30% against the global backdrop of 18%? Can China continue to offer incentives and opportunities for investors from Europe, from Germany, for instance?
In my mind is that the big German players like BMW, BASF, or Volkswagen, they are all investing more and more in China. They put their future to China. And even their investments, they are not paid by German subsidies, but they are paid by the win they make in China. So, but in general, for small and medium enterprises, there is a point I already mentioned, that especially small and medium enterprises sometimes complain a little bit that the market access could be improved in China. And if China works, as the Third Central Committee said in its communique, improve this more and more and more, I'm quite confident that the investments, direct investments, will grow again in China.
China seems to have been doing that. For instance, China, besides announcing, pronouncing the importance of foreign invested enterprises in terms of market access, the items on the so-called negative list for foreign investors, meaning the sectors that foreign investors cannot invest, that list has gotten shorter. In 10 years' time, it went down from 190 to now 31 nationwide. Mr. Askari, can we expect this list to continue to shorten? Because China already announced it will remove all restrictions on foreign investment in the manufacturing sector. Can we expect this list to go even shorter? And why is China doing this when other countries are saying, no, we don't want more investment, we don't want more exposure to vulnerable supply chain or dependency, but China is saying, come in and let's embrace each other even deeper.
Yeah, one important thing to remember is that what China, in terms of foreign investment, China does not need capital to come into China. China does have a surplus in terms of monetary capital. What China is interested in is to cooperate on innovative, the advanced technological sectors. And the more China develops, the more self-confident it becomes, that it is not fearful of competition, it's not fearful of dominance of foreign companies in China, and therefore the list will become shorter and shorter because China does need input from innovative, especially small and medium corporations who are very intelligent, and this is something which brings something additional to the Chinese market, to the Chinese economy. So in this sense, China is not worried about, because it has grown so, strong and powerful and innovative. It does not fear competition of foreign companies coming into the country. On the contrary, they will bring more healthy competition inside China, but will also bring technology to the Chinese economy. So this is where things are different. It's a question of self-confidence. The reason Europe and the United States are closing the doors is their self-confidence has gone so much down, and they are fearful of competition. And because previously we had a monopoly on many technologies, and we could sell these for the price we want, Europe and the United States want to the rest of the world. But now China is developing technologies that are more competitive and in some cases superior to Western technologies, and that creates a problem.
Okay, Mr. Lee, how do you look at the trade relation and the opening up of service sector? For instance, in March this year, Standard Chartered Securities China Limited began operation, and that's the first newly established wholly foreign-owned securities firm in China, coming from Hong Kong, which is, a very important link in terms of financial services. What kind of opportunities are you seeing there? And is China potentially worried that, if it is overly exposed in terms of financial services, it can also expose itself to great uncertainty and risks?
Well, this is actually a major move that also reflects the confidence of Chinese leadership have about its own economy. Of course, that the Chinese will also deal with the issue of the risk in the financial sector. The fact is that they continue to open the service sector in the financial sector that speak loud the Chinese government determination for openness. And this service sector will really do a lot of foreign investors. As you probably know that U.S. will have a large delegation of entrepreneurs and major companies, major financial institutions visit Beijing in the matter of days, if not, I think it's about the days. So that certainly shows that China's engagement with even the United States, which actually explain the number of jobs you mentioned earlier in the trade front. So that's a very, very important development, and China certainly will show that China is still the largest market in the service sector, in financial sector, plus also into manufacturing in many other areas.
Let's also look at the people-to-people side, which is a very encouraging development. And I want to share the latest numbers to all of you. Since China rolled out the unilateral visa-free policy since last year, in the first 5 months of this year, the number of inbound foreign visitors exceeded 12 million, with over 7 million entering without the need for a visa. Mr. Grobler, how significant is that move for people and also for China, for people to understand China better?
What is very encouraging to the international community is and I mentioned earlier on, the foreign policy approach of peace, development, people-to-people exchanges. It is no matter what country the China has contact with, whether it's the US, despite difficult conditions at the moment, there is constantly approaches by the Chinese authorities, by NGOs, to have contact, people-to-people contact with the US, but also with Africa, with the international, with the developing world. It's a key and it's a key element in international relations. As a diplomat, people-to-people exchanges are so important. And the issue of visas, that's also very encouraging, to encourage people to come and visit China, to get to know your culture, to get to know your people.
Time is limited. I'm going to ask one more question to Mr. Li, because coming with some Chinese background, I want to grade Mr. Li for this question. What are some of the risks, honestly, and uncertainties that China could be faced with in the next 5 years in implementing these ambitious reforms?
Well, we still yet to see how that communicate resonate with Chinese people. I think there's some challenge about the confidence, because the previous model of economic growth, which emphasizes export and the property development, high volume of IPO, all come to end. China needs to find a new development model, which this community highlights, which is the Chinese modernization, which emphasizes green development, science, technology, and clean energy, and many others. But this will take some time. This is one challenge. The other challenge is international environment, because China's economic slowdown is a result of global structure problem. So we still do not know how global economy will recover. But what's encouraging is Chinese government wanted to lead the next wave of regional development and also new wave of economic globalization, because China benefited greatly from economic globalization, and hope that China's emphasis on green development, infrastructure development, which is exemplified in Belt and Road Initiative, can expand to some more new regions and etc. And hope that the U.S. and the China economic relation and the China and the Europe economic relation will return to normalcy. So I think this is certainly it's much easier to say than done. I think how to see the Western world react to China's development. In my view, only it's a matter of time Western countries will realize, first and foremost, China is still a huge market. I think it's better to work with China rather than create this kind of blocks and the two systems. This will not go far, will not be the interest of the Western world.
All right, we have to leave it there. Many thanks to my guest, Professor Li Cheng, founding director of the Center on Contemporary China and the World, CCCW, at the University of Hong Kong. Yasiru Ranaraja, Director of Bristol Belt and Road Initiative Sri Lanka, Gerd Johannes Grobler, former senior diplomat and ambassador of South Africa, Michael Borchmann, former Director General of the International Affairs Department of the State of Hesse, Germany, Hussein Askari, Vice President of the Belt and Road Institute in Sweden, also Distinguished Research Fellow at Guangdong Institute of International Strategies. With that, we come to the end of this special edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and X using the handle Liu Xin in Beijing. On behalf of the whole team, thank you for watching. You've got the point.